Hey guys, tonight we slip into silk sheets that smell faintly of sandalwood and secrets, in a palace where desire isn't spontaneous, it's scheduled. Imagine opening your eyes in a room dimly lit by lacquered lanterns, the air thick with incense and expectation. You're in ancient China, the Han Dynasty to be precise, and you've just been summoned to the Emperor's chambers. Don't get excited. You're not here for romance. You're here because your family pulled the right strings at the right moment, and now your body is state property. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and the local time in the comments. Let's see who else is falling asleep with us tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle barefoot down a lacquered hallway, polished to a mirror's sheen, the soles of your feet whispering across ancient wood that has carried the secrets of hundreds of women before you. Servants pass silently like ghosts, their sleeves swishing in choreographed movements. You pass a series of carved screens, dragons chasing pearls, phoenixes poised in flight, all of them watching. Everything in this palace watches. Especially tonight. Two eunuchs wait at the doors to the imperial bedchamber. They bow without meeting your eyes, then gently push the doors open. Inside, everything is hushed velvet and soft golden light, with a scent of dried osmanthus and chrysanthemum wafting from bronze censers shaped like cranes. The emperor's bed stands raised like a throne itself, 6 steps up, a statement of power even in sleep. You pause at the bottom of the steps and remember your training. Bow exactly 3 times, once for heaven, once for the emperor, once for your ancestors. Then wait, do not speak, do not sit, and above all, do not initiate anything. That would be presumptuous. That could ruin everything. The emperor is veiled in silk curtains. You can't see him clearly, just a silhouette, broad shoulders, long hair tied loosely. He may be 30 or 50. You're not told his age. You're told his titles, his preferences in incense, his birth hour, his lucky numbers. Intimacy doesn't enter the equation. Because this is not a private affair. It's a state ritual, and you are tonight's offering. The Han Dynasty's sexual politics were entangled in ritual and bureaucracy. The emperor often had dozens, sometimes hundreds of concubines, most of them given as political gifts by noble families eager for influence. But there was a system to it. Visits were scheduled and recorded. Nothing was left to chance, not even pleasure. This system, known as the Yeji, or night register, functioned like a rotating file. Each night, concubines' names were written on small bamboo slips placed into a lacquered box. The emperor would select a slip, and the chosen woman would be brought to his quarters. The rest of the court would know the outcome by dawn. Eunuchs recorded everything: the time she arrived, the time she left, whether the deed was done, and even whether she bathed afterward. There was no privacy, only protocol. You try to calm your breathing as you ascend the steps, every footfall echoing like a drumbeat. You've heard the story of Zhao Feiyan, a dancer of ethereal beauty who rose to empress not through love, but through relentless strategy. She and her sister, Zhao He, famously controlled the emperor's affections for years by coordinating their visits and eliminating rivals through whispered accusations. At least 2 other concubines were rumored to have slipped on the palace steps, though no one ever found witnesses. Historians still argue whether these stories were exaggerated by jealous factions, or if the Zhao sisters truly manipulated the throne with nothing but eyeliner and elbow nudges. But the reality remains. Power in the palace was brokered through the bedroom, not the battlefield. You kneel beside the emperor's bed. He gestures for you to approach. You comply, gracefully, hiding the tremble in your hands. This moment, this night, could elevate your entire lineage, or doom it. It depends not on love, or even chemistry, but on whether you're remembered fondly enough to be summoned again. Later, when the deed is done and the curtain has fallen, you're escorted quietly back to your quarters. A servant records your name and the exact time you left in a slim wooden ledger, bound with red silk. This document is more valuable than any love letter. It may one day be used to prove your child's claim to the throne. You sip tepid chrysanthemum tea and lie still on a cool mat, eyes open to the ceiling, too wired to sleep. You did everything right, you think, but there's no way to be sure. You remember a curious story one maid told you of an emperor too sick to fulfill his duties who sent a look-alike in his place. It sounds absurd, but the maid swore on her ancestor's grave that it happened. Fringe scholars sometimes bring up this idea in symposiums, wondering aloud whether some emperors really used doubles for knights they couldn't handle. It seems unlikely, but not impossible, especially when the act itself wasn't about desire. It was about ritual, continuity, the appearance of control. You roll onto your side and notice the faint scent of camphor from the wardrobe. The room is cold now. You pull a silk sheet over your shoulder and exhale slowly, almost inaudibly. Tomorrow, the court will be buzzing, not with gossip, but with calculation. If your name appears again in the register soon, it means you're ascending. If not, well, a concubine without favor is a ghost in waiting. Welcome to the palace. It's beautiful, golden, and utterly ruthless. You don't get to sleep in, by the way. The sun isn't even up before your door slides open with a whisper and a handmaiden begins dressing you in ceremonial robes. Not for another imperial visit, yet but for your appearance at court breakfast. You'll be seated behind a carved lattice, invisible to the men, but your presence will be noted. Everything is always noted here. There's a saying in the palace, the bedchamber is the front line of politics. You're already starting to understand what they meant. This isn't about love or attraction or even the emperor's whim. It's about influence, real, far-reaching influence. Because once you've been summoned, even once, you're on the board. And in this court, every woman is a chess piece. Some are pawns, some become queens, and almost all of them start off as concubines. You sit silently behind the lattice while officials murmur about grain quotas, border skirmishes, and tax exemptions for silk producers in the South. But no one mentions that your family's rice barge was mysteriously cleared for a new trade route this morning. Coincidence? Of course not. Your single night has already turned into a ripple across court affairs. It's dizzying how quickly everything moves. Concubines weren't just romantic companions. They were often from elite families whose political alignment needed managing. Appointing someone's daughter to the palace was a soft way of securing loyalty or controlling rebellion. And the higher a woman rose in the emperor's affections, the more her natal family prospered. There's a common misconception that these women were passive beauties lounging around on cushions all day. But make no mistake, they were players, ruthless ones. Their beauty was just the opening move. The real game was subtle manipulation, of emotion, of timing, of availability. It was about who could get noticed without seeming too obvious, and who could disappear a rival without leaving fingerprints. Take Lady Ban, a famous scholar concubine during the Han Dynasty. Unlike the Zhao sisters, Lady Ban refused the emperor's nightly summons one evening, claiming she was focused on her reading. Audacious? Maybe, but it made her stand out and earned her the emperor's deeper respect. She used her literary skill to maintain favor in a way that felt dignified, even intellectual. Lady Ban wasn't interested in outdressing the competition. She outwrote them. But even the smartest concubines still walked a tightrope. There were always rules, explicit and unspoken. Like the rule that you must never ask for a visit. That would imply ambition. And ambition in a woman was suspect. Better to let others arrange it, to seem surprised when the invitation comes. Delighted, but never eager. Always deferent, never bold. It's like corporate office politics, except the stakes involve dynasties. You return to your chambers and find a package waiting. Inside, a hairpin of gold, shaped like a lotus in bloom. A subtle nod of favor, the emperor's way of saying, "You did well. You'll wear it at your next appearance." Just enough shimmer to remind the court who was chosen last night. But not everyone is smiling. From across the courtyard, another concubine watches you. Her gaze is serene, but her hand trembles slightly as she pours tea for a visiting dowager. She was the emperor's favorite last season. Now the attention's shifting. In this place, favor isn't won. It's rented, and rent is due every night. Historians still argue whether concubines truly wielded political power or merely reflected it. Some believe they were puppets, decorative, replaceable. Others argue they were the unseen diplomats of the empire, forging quiet alliances in a world that didn't formally recognize their influence. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. Your friend Lian, who came from a merchant family, once told you how her cousin, just 16, was sent to the palace after her father sold salt without a license. Rather than punishment, the family offered her as tribute. Within weeks, trade restrictions were lifted. Her cousin never even saw the emperor, but her presence was enough to placate an angry official who fancied her. One girl's sacrifice. One family saved. These stories are common. They're whispered between chambermaids and echoed in poems carved into bamboo by lovesick scholars. The palace was not a place for love, it was a place for calculation. Still, love occasionally made its way in, disguised in poetry, in the soft press of hands beneath wide sleeves, in the lingering glance across a moonlit garden. But mostly, it was survival. And survival meant learning fast. You're expected to master not just etiquette, but symbolism. Every color you wear sends a message. Every flower in your hair, every sleeve length, every incense you burn, it all communicates rank, mood, intention. Today you wear pale green, new favor, hope. Not too bold, not too meek, just enough to signal your recent proximity to power. One of your handmaidens leans in to whisper, the Lady Shen has requested the embroidery loom. You blink. That's a message, a soft threat. The embroidery loom is placed near the emperor's favorite tea garden, visible from his window. A woman using it signals that she's waiting to be summoned again. To claim it so soon after your own visit? It's a direct challenge. You respond calmly. Then I shall take the poetry scrolls to the water pavilion. A countermove. Poets are often invited to recite before the emperor in that very spot. With any luck, your verse will end up in his ears, then in his memory. Welcome to your new life, equal parts pageantry and psychological warfare. At night, you lie awake listening to the rustling of silk in the hallways. Somewhere, another woman is being summoned. You wonder what she'll wear. You wonder what her family wants. You wonder whether she'll be back tomorrow or gone by next week. No one says it out loud, but everyone knows. Sex here isn't about passion. It's about position. Your body isn't an object. It's a strategy. And tonight, the game continues. Tonight, it's raining. Slow, whispering droplets that slide down the red lacquered railings and bead on the stone lions guarding the eastern wing. You wrap yourself in a quilted robe and stare at your reflection in the polished bronze mirror. It's not the face of someone in love. It's the face of someone doing math. Calculations, probabilities, angles of approach. Because in this palace, even romance has rules. Especially romance. The emperor doesn't just wake up one day and decide he wants company. Well, maybe he does. But that desire is immediately filtered through protocols. You don't just drop by the emperor's chambers. You're summoned after your name is retrieved from the night register that functions somewhere between a harem directory and a royal spreadsheet. And oh, the paperwork. You'd be amazed everything is recorded. Who the emperor saw, for how long, whether wine was served, whether the woman wore red or blue, whether she smiled first or he did. These entries aren't just gossipy notes, they're evidence. If a concubine claims she's pregnant, her name in that ledger is the first proof. Scholars still debate whether this obsessive documentation was about maintaining order or whether it was simply a reflection of the empire's larger obsession with control. Because if you can't manage the emperor's own household, how can you manage an empire? Eunuchs run the entire operation with the precision of seasoned bureaucrats. It's like a bedroom DMV, but with more incense and zero mercy. The eunuchs are, ironically, some of the most powerful men in the palace. Castrated, yes, but that's exactly why they're trusted. No sons, no ambitions, in theory, just lifelong devotion to palace operations. You might imagine them as passive, shadowy background figures, but no. They know everything. Who cried last night? Who faked it? Who bribed the incense boy to put a lucky charm under the emperor's pillow? And they talk. One old eunuch named Sheng tells you over tea, strictly off the record, about the 3-knock system used during Emperor Wu's time. If the emperor knocked 3 times on the headboard, it meant he was dissatisfied. The woman would be quietly removed before sunrise and not summoned again. 2 knocks? Acceptable. 1 knock? Excellent. Sheng claims to have heard only a single 1 knock in 30 years. You try not to laugh at the absurdity, but also you wonder, what if you got no knocks at all? The funny thing is, you're not even the only one playing this game tonight. In another wing of the palace, the night register is being updated by lamplight. The slips of bamboo are shuffled by rank, recent history, and court favor. A concubine's proximity to the emperor's mother, or her connections in the finance ministry, might push her name closer to the top. This isn't love, it's logistics. And sometimes the most alluring woman isn't the prettiest or the most poetic. Sometimes she just happens to have a cousin who controls grain shipments in a rebellious province. Suddenly, her calligraphy becomes fascinating. Tonight, your name isn't drawn. It's okay, you expected this. The emperor's pattern is to rotate new favorites with older ones, keep the court guessing, keep the gossip fresh, keep everyone off balance. You're still in the afterglow of last week's visit. Too soon to press again. Too late, however, and you risk becoming stale. So you play the long game. You attend the poetry reading near the lotus pond. You make sure your poems reflect humility, loyalty, subtle yearning. Nothing too dramatic. You cry gently, just once, while reciting a verse about moonlight on empty sleeves. An old trick, but an effective one. The eunuch scribe nearby scribbles a note. You've been logged. You exist. For now. Meanwhile, another woman is having her moment. Her name is Mayun. She's new. Her family deals in silver, and rumor has it the emperor is trying to stabilize the coinage. Suddenly, Mayun's almond eyes and graceful bow seem a lot more attractive. Still, you don't resent her. Not exactly. You watch her pass by, flanked by attendants, a subtle gold ribbon in her hair that marks her first summon. She looks nervous. You remember that look. There's an old saying passed among the older concubines. Don't shine too brightly too soon. The flame that dazzles fast burns out first. You wonder if Mayun knows that yet. One of your maids brings you a warm rice cake and whispers, Lady Shen didn't return last night. Your eyebrow arches slightly. That's rare. Usually, the concubine returns to her quarters before dawn. But sometimes, just sometimes, if the emperor is particularly pleased, he allows her to stay until morning. It's a massive honor, and it sends a message. You chew slowly. Lady Shen has been here longer than most. She's clever, patient, and never speaks out of turn. But she's also ambitious. If she's consolidating her position again, you'll need to adapt. Not all of this is visible to the outside world. To the common people, the emperor's love life is an exotic mystery, full of shimmering robes and passion. But inside, it's a series of paper slips, half-truths, and strategic eye contact. Historians still argue whether these records truly reflect what happened in the bedchamber, or whether they were crafted to create an illusion of order. After all, who could fact-check the emperor? What you do know is this. Your chances of survival depend on being noticed, but not too much. On being desirable, but never threatening. On playing the game and knowing when to fold. It's not about pleasure. It never was. It's about politics, and the bed is just another battlefield. The inner court is never truly silent. Even now, as moonlight lays itself across the glazed tiles like a silk shawl, there are whispers. Soft conversations glide under doors, carried on the soles of embroidered slippers. You step through an arched gate into the women's quarters, the Hukgung, where the real web of power is spun. This is not the palace shown in scroll paintings, with giggling maidens and delicate Guqian music. No, this is the engine room, the control center, the storm's eye, quiet only on the surface. You were taught early on that the inner court isn't just a residence, it's a hive. And every concubine is a worker bee, some nurturing, some stinging, all buzzing around the queen. That queen? The Empress Dowager. She doesn't need to share a bed to wield power. She already has the throne's ear, because in many cases she raised it. The Empress Dowager is usually the emperor's mother, or occasionally, a powerful widow left behind by a previous reign. And she runs this place with a lacquered iron fist. If the emperor is the heart of the empire, the dowager is its spine. Your first encounter with her wasn't face-to-face. You were summoned to attend a tea ceremony in her honor. A test, of course. Everything here is a test. She sat on a dais flanked by peony-patterned screens, face serene, hands folded like origami. Her voice, when it came, was silk wrapped around a blade. She asked about your lineage, your father's income, whether you knew any poetry. Then, with the smallest twitch of her lips, and do you sleep peacefully? That's code. You're expected to say yes, of course. But you add, peacefully, under heaven's protection. That line is carefully chosen. It means the emperor, yes, but also her. You pass, barely. Later that week, your maid finds a sachet of sweet-smelling herbs in your chamber. a subtle gesture of acknowledgement. You're on her radar now. The Dowager controls many things, but especially access. She can raise a woman from bathmaid to consort with one whisper, and she can bury you in protocol until you vanish from memory. You've seen it happen. Lady Qian, the laughing one with cherry blossom perfume, went from frequent summons to cold exile after making an offhand joke about too much incense in front of the Dowager's personal attendant. Gone. Some say she lives in the far west wing now, weaving tapestries and praying a little too loudly. Others say she was married off to a nobleman in the provinces. You suspect the truth lies somewhere damp and unspoken. The power dynamic is complicated. The emperor might rule the land, but the inner court? That's the Dowager's kingdom. She decides which concubines get sent to which banquets, whose poems get accidentally read at court, and which lady's cousin suddenly receives an important civil post. You notice something curious one morning. A new attendant assigned to your rooms, a quiet girl named Shuang with eyes like still water. She's not particularly chatty, but she knows things. One day, she casually mentions the Dowager's fondness for plum wine. You tuck that away. At your next embroidery display, you stitch a tiny plum blossom into your sash. That detail gets noticed. You're still in the game. But it's not just about currying favor. The Dowager, you realize, is playing a much bigger game. Dynastic continuity. She wants stability, which means controlling the emperor's affections just enough to prevent palace chaos. Letting him fall in love recklessly could destabilize factions. Letting him play favorites too hard could ignite jealousies. She needs a rotation of companions, yes, but one she choreographs with a master conductor's ear. There's a tale you've heard more than once of a concubine named Lady Wei, beloved by the emperor and despised by the Empress Dowager. She bore him a son, whispered promises into his ear at night, and nearly convinced him to name the child heir. But before it could happen, she fell suddenly ill. The Dowager mourned, of course, publicly, but she also promoted another consort 2 days later. Coincidence? Historians still argue whether Lady Wei died of natural causes or courtly poisons. There's no evidence, only absence. You hear footsteps now, deliberate, padded ones. Shuang returns, bows deeply, and hands you a slip of folded parchment. On it, a single line of poetry. When cranes take flight, shadows remain. An old proverb. Translation? You are not invisible. You look up at her, but she's already bowed out. It's enough to make your skin prickle. There's an odd comfort in knowing the rules, even when they're dangerous. You know now that your life depends just on charm or grace, but on reading the air, the glances, the pauses in conversation. The game here is about who speaks, yes, but more importantly, who listens. A fringe tale says that in certain periods, the Dowager kept her own hidden register of which girls were allowed near the emperor. If a name appeared on her blacklist, that girl's candles would mysteriously stay unlit. No visit. No chance. Some scholars scoff at this. Too melodramatic, too convenient. But you're starting to think, in a world of silk screens and coded poems, who's to say? Later, while sipping jasmine tea, you overhear two older women murmuring about a ghost concubine. A girl so favored that even after her death, the emperor ordered her chamber untouched, her robes left hanging, her perfume kept stocked. Some say he still visits the room. Others say the Dowager sealed it forever. You smile faintly. You've heard enough stories now to know one truth. In the inner court, memory is power. And forgetting someone is the most political act of all. You step out onto the veranda, rain still ticking against the tiles. The air is heavy but calm. Somewhere in this palace, the Dowager is sipping plum wine and arranging lives like stones on a go-board. And you're still on the board. The rain has passed, but the stone paths are still slick. You tiptoe across the courtyard as if walking across a sleeping tiger. The scent of wet pine and something faintly herbal lingers in the air. Somewhere, a stringed zither plays a melancholy tune. It might be for ambience. It might be a signal. You're headed to the nursery wing, though you're not supposed to call it that. Officially, it's the Hall of Auspicious Continuity, which is, of course, code for where we keep the imperial babies. But there are very few babies. Fewer than you'd think, considering how often the emperor is, let's say, statistically active. That's because pregnancy in the palace is like landing a dragon on a pin. Technically possible, wildly dangerous, and very, very political. Every time a concubine conceives, it's like throwing a grenade into the royal succession plan. You're not just carrying a baby, you're carrying a potential heir. And that makes you dangerous, valuable, sure, but also expendable. You pass a tall lantern carved with cranes and clouds. Just beyond it is a discreet gate leading to the women's physicians, male doctors, yes, but carefully chosen, chaperoned by eunuchs, and forbidden from even looking at a concubine's face. They take pulses through silk. They deliver prescriptions without eye contact, and their notes sealed. It's all for the sake of appearances. Because, of course, these are imperial pregnancies, holy matters, which is why every part of the process is bureaucratized beyond comprehension. Once a woman is confirmed pregnant, she's given special robes, diet restrictions, a separate chamber, and a guard. For protection, yes, but also to prevent her from slipping away and disappearing quietly. She's now a vessel, not a woman, a dynastic opportunity. You see it on their faces, the shift. Women who were once scheming, laughing, plotting suddenly become still, watchful. Everything they say is now evidence. Every movement is measured. One slip and a rival could seize the opportunity to accidentally knock over her tea table or suggest an herbal remedy that is anything but. There's a tale of a consort, Lady Rue, who birthed a child during a thunderstorm. Her son cried loudly the moment he entered the world, a sign of strength. Within hours, envoys were dispatched to temples. Scrolls were written, offerings made. That cry echoed all the way to the border provinces. But Lady Rui, she died mysteriously within a week. Some say childbirth. Others, quieter voices, suggest poison laced into her bathwater. Because once she'd fulfilled her role, she was a threat to the Empress, or the Dowager, or the wrong general's ambitions. Honestly, take your pick. Historians still argue whether the deaths of concubines post-childbirth were due to poor hygiene or political elimination. Medical records from the era are vague, intentionally so. You stop by a window and watch two young boys being led through the garden by tutors. One is the emperor's official heir. The other, probably not. But he might be one day if the stars align, or if someone helps them align. The thing is, once you've given birth, your body becomes evidence. Your worth increases, but so does your vulnerability. You remember Mayun, the new concubine with the almond eyes? She's been vomiting in the mornings. No one says it out loud yet, but the servants have noticed. The kitchen has started sending bland rice porridge to her quarters. And her chamber now has a guard outside, not a soldier, but a eunuch with the posture of a scribe. He's not there for protection. He's there for record keeping. You don't know whether to pity her or envy her. She's ascending, yes, but fast rises usually come with hard landings. Back in your own quarters, your handmaiden brews you tea made with dried lotus seeds and goji berries. Good for vitality, she says. You wonder briefly if this is a hint. You've been passed over 2 nights in a row. Not a bad sign yet, but the window is narrow. A concubine's prime is like the summer lotus, brief, brilliant, and easily replaced. You examine your reflection again, looking for clues, lines, changes, signs that the dowager might notice and interpret as decline. Or worse, signs that someone else might notice and use against you. This is not a place where you age gracefully. This is a place where you age strategically. There's a fringe rumor among the attendants that some concubines, desperate to conceive, secretly paid Taoist monks for fertility charms or consumed tonics made from powdered deer antler, dried seahorse, or more bizarrely, bat guano. You don't know if that one's real, but the desperation is, and who could blame them? One child can elevate your family for 3 generations, or, more rarely, cost everyone their heads. Because with a child comes a claim, and with a claim comes conflict. The Empress, official wife of the Emperor, might not always be the mother of the heir. In fact, she often isn't. That tension simmers constantly in the palace. She watches the concubines with quiet calculation. Every swelling belly is a potential threat to her power. You once heard a dry, biting joke whispered among the maids. The Empress doesn't need to give birth. She just needs to survive long enough to adopt someone else's. It's not funny, but it's true. Sometimes, if a concubine's child is particularly promising, the Empress will request to raise the child herself. A great honor on paper. But in reality, it severs the mother's influence. That child now belongs to someone else, and the mother, She fades into quiet ceremonial duties, remembered only in family genealogies. If she's lucky. The emperor rarely intervenes in these matters. He has wars to manage, trade routes to secure, ancestral tombs to renovate. His children are symbols more than people, at least while they're young. And the women who bear them? Temporary fixtures. You lie back on your sleeping mat and stare at the flickering lantern on the wall. You haven't conceived. Yet. You're not sure if that's a blessing or a missed opportunity. But one thing is clear. In this palace, every womb is a wager. It's twilight now, and the palace is beginning to glow with the warm orange of lantern light. A breeze brushes past the carved windows and flutters the edge of your sleeve like a ghost brushing your skin. You're sitting in the library wing, a quiet place few concubines visit, not because they're unwelcome, but because most are too busy tending to appearances, alliances, and astrology charts. But you're here for a reason. Tucked behind the stacks of state histories and moral treatises lies a locked lacquer cabinet known only to the older eunuchs, and curiously, a handful of concubines who trade in whispers more than perfume. Tonight, the cabinet opens. The eunuch with the long fingernails, yes, the one with the sesame seed mold by his ear, is here with you. He doesn't speak, just unlocks the case with a tiny jade key and steps aside. Inside are scrolls, dozens of them, some faded, others pristine. These are not records of state matters. These are manuals, Fang Zhongshu, texts on the art of the bedchamber. But don't let the word art mislead you. These scrolls aren't about pleasure. They're about power. The most infamous of them? The classic of the plain girl, supposedly taught by a celestial maiden to the Yellow Emperor himself. It outlines how a ruler should conduct intimacy not for delight, but for immortality. Yes, you heard that right. Taoist sexual teachings at the time were deeply cosmological. The idea wasn't just about reproduction, it was about harmony. The emperor, as the son of heaven, had to regulate his yin and yang. Intercourse was a ritual act, carefully timed and executed with the precision of a military parade. The emperor was expected to control his own release, to absorb female energy without surrendering his own. Basically, ancient China turned sex into quantum physics. You run your fingers along one particularly old scroll, the edges crisp from age. Inside, diagrams, positions, breathing patterns. Not what you'd expect in a Confucian empire obsessed with modesty. But remember, Confucianism was the outer layer. Taoism, that was the internal wiring. And Taoism had no patience for romanticism. Intercourse was about energetic exchange, not feelings. A well-executed session could allegedly improve memory, sharpen vision, and prolong life. A poorly handled one drained vital essence. So yeah, imagine that pressure before a royal rendezvous. Historians still debate whether these practices were truly followed in the imperial bedroom or whether they were more aspirational guidelines like your New Year's resolution to stop doom scrolling at midnight. Some emperors were said to follow these teachings strictly, rotating through multiple concubines in one night, but withholding climax each time. Efficient? Questionable. Exhausting? Absolutely. You remember hearing about Emperor Xuanzong of the Tang dynasty, long after your current time, but relevant nonetheless. He was said to be so immersed in Taoist sexual alchemy that he would engage in rituals involving multiple partners to balance the cosmos. It was less a wild party and more of a metaphysical Sudoku. You blink back into the present. The eunuch replaces the scrolls and locks the cabinet again. You're not allowed to copy anything, only observe. But even a glimpse is enough to shift your perspective. You thought intimacy here was a political tool, and it is, but it's also mysticism, ritual, philosophy turned physical. You step outside and pass by the scholar's garden where a group of junior concubines are practicing tea ceremony by moonlight. You catch snippets of conversation. Someone's cousin has sent her a love poem. Someone else received a sandalwood comb from a mysterious admirer. One girl, younger than the rest, says she's terrified of her next summons. She hasn't memorized the Sunu Jing, hasn't learned the correct breath pacing, and she can't hold a headstand. Everyone laughs. You don't. Because you remember the other side of this. There's a shadow practice known as Shi Feng, stone sealing, rumored to be used by particularly ruthless factions within the palace. The idea? That a woman could be sealed spiritually by bad energy during intercourse, drained of vitality and luck. It's fringe stuff, whispered in the margins of banned books, but some concubines believe it. Some claim it happened to them, and whether or not it's real, belief here is almost as powerful as fact. Later in your room, you light a single candle and breathe deeply. You've read the scrolls, you've learned the rituals, you've even tried some, discreetly, of course, with the help of your maid's vague explanations and a pillow for practice. But you're starting to see the broader truth. In this palace, everything is coded. A gesture, a bedtime, a breath held too long. Desire isn't personal, it's cosmic, and you are expected to know your place in the stars and the bed. You smile grimly. What a romance. You're summoned again. This time not to the emperor's bedchamber, but to a smaller, quieter pavilion near the south garden. A location reserved for less formal encounters. The kind that aren't officially recorded on the night register, but are noticed all the same. You know what this means. You've moved up a rung, not quite in full favor, but close enough to be tested. As you walk the curved path toward the pavilion, you feel the eyes, hidden in the lattice, behind silk curtains, through screens painted with mandarin ducks and drifting lotus. You're not paranoid, you're simply watched, always. The room is warm with sandalwood and a single oil lamp. There's wine, a little low table of sugared plums and ginger crisps, and a book. No, not just a book, a pillow book. The emperor gestures lazily at it. Read, he says, reclining on the wide cushions. His robe is loose, but his gaze is sharp. You kneel, open the book, and find yourself staring at painted pages of positions, diagrams, gentle metaphors. This isn't some crude scroll. It's delicately illustrated, poetic in tone, and clearly well read. The emperor likes it not because it's provocative, but because it's symbolic. He wants to know what you think of it. You read softly. The metaphors flutter from your lips like petals. The crane descends upon the peach blossom. The dragon drinks at the moon pool. The jasmine twines gently round the banyan trunk. You pause at that one. He smirks. You say nothing. This kind of moment is more intimate than sex. It's about recognition, perception, whether you know how to read between the lines, and whether you know when not to. You've heard of these books before. Pillow literature, shared among nobles, scholars, courtesans. Some of them border on instructional manuals, others poetry. Still others are outright satire, mocking the very rituals they describe. There's one famous example, a short story from the Tang dynasty in which a scholar tries to seduce a courtesan using obscure references from a banned sex manual. She corrects him with a quote from Confucius and leaves him blushing. It's hilarious and quietly revolutionary. Some of these works were written by women, yes, actual women. One, attributed only as Lady Autumn Leaves, wrote an erotic treatise disguised as a medical guide. Another, titled The Hidden Orchard, describes the secret affections of two palace dancers, written in veiled metaphor, but unmistakably queer. Most of these texts were banned eventually, but not burned, because even emperors needed reading material on lonely nights. Historians still argue over the origins of these manuals. Were they Taoist in root, courtly diversions, hidden subversions of the Confucian order? The truth, as always, is messy. You run your fingers along the silk binding of the book in front of you. This particular copy is bound in red thread, a symbol not of love, but of fate. In Chinese legend, the red thread of destiny binds two souls together across time and space. You wonder if the emperor believes in that, or if he just likes the aesthetic. You hand the book back. He doesn't open it again. Instead, he pours 2 cups of warmed wine, hands you one, and gestures toward the open veranda. The moon is high now, glowing like a silver coin pressed into the heavens. You think it's all politics, don't you? He says suddenly. You pause. A trap? A test? Or just a late-night musing? You answer slowly. Not all, but most of it. He laughs softly. Good. Later, when you return to your chambers, the wine still humming in your veins, you find something waiting for you. A scroll. Not sealed, just left atop your folded robes. Its edges are aged, its script flowing. You unfurl it carefully and find a list. Not of concubines, not of poems. It's a list of banned texts. And there, midway down, is the very book you just read aloud. You don't panic, but you understand. Someone wanted you to know this wasn't just a reading session. It was a demonstration, a test of complicity, a little taste of the forbidden wrapped in protocol. The palace does that, offers you a sweet, then counts your teeth afterward. You sip tea and think about the other women you've seen reading secretly, tucking pages under mattresses, hiding verses inside hollow hair combs. Not just for arousal or escape, but for knowledge. Because these books don't just teach technique, they teach strategy, timing, control, performance. Even the blush you show isn't real. It's a skill, like calligraphy. There's a fringe belief in the southern courts that some concubines used pillow books as coded messages, writing political alliances in the margins, passing state secrets between the pages of moans and metaphors. It sounds far-fetched, but it wouldn't surprise you. Not anymore. You glance down again at the scroll. Someone's watching. Always watching. You blow out your candle and lie still in the dark. The emperor may forget your poem, your scent, even your name, but he'll remember that you read the book and didn't flinch. You wake up to birdsong, but not the sweet, carefree kind. No, these are palace birds, carefully bred, meticulously trained, and stationed by design near the windows of favored concubines. Their chirping isn't just nature's lullaby, it's surveillance. Sound carries here, even in the morning, especially in the morning. You stretch, your joints softly cracking like rice paper. Another day, another set of decisions. Your attendant quietly lays out a gown in soft violet, subtle, refined, and loaded with implication. You nod. You'll need that kind of balance today, because today you're attending a Taoist ceremony in the Jade Pavilion, a ritual meant to bless the emperor's health, longevity, and, quite conveniently, his virility. Yes, this is exactly what it sounds like. You walk the path toward the pavilion, passing incense plumes that curl and twist like dragon tails. The air smells of burnt mugwort, pine resin, and unexpectedly orange peel. There's a kind of ceremonial nervousness in the air. This isn't a routine prayer, it's alignment, celestial tuning. The Taoists believe that sex isn't just physical, it's cosmic. That every act of intimacy, especially for someone like the emperor, is part of maintaining harmony between yin and yang. It's not just about keeping the royal line going, it's about balancing the entire universe. No pressure. You're led to a side hall where you and several other concubines are seated in a perfect semicircle, facing a dais covered in scrolls, crystals, and two absolutely enormous bronze turtles. The priest begins chanting in a tone so low it might be humming from the earth itself. You close your eyes and listen. The cadence is oddly soothing. He speaks of the 9 harmonies, the 3 sacred gates, and something called essence preservation. That last part gets your attention. In Taoist bedroom alchemy, Jing, essence, is the core of your life force. Every act of intimacy exchanges Jing. For women, this is yin essence. For men, yang. The idea is to carefully absorb energy, not lose it. A skilled practitioner could theoretically prolong life by cycling energy during sex without climaxing. Now imagine trying to do that after a few cups of plum wine and a long day of palace politics. Historians still argue whether emperors genuinely practiced this, or whether it was just a metaphysical smokescreen for having multiple partners in one night. The Taoist texts were conveniently vague. Circulate, they said. Retain, they said. Not exactly scientific, but full of metaphors involving dragons, cranes, and mist-covered mountains. One scroll you remember described the optimal number of concubines to visit in a single night, 9, each offering a different element. The emperor was expected to begin with 1 and rotate through all without releasing his yang essence. Each encounter was supposed to refine his internal balance, like tuning an instrument made of flesh and breath. Spoiler, most emperors probably didn't get past number 4. Back at the ceremony, the chanting grows louder. The priest unfurls a long red ribbon inscribed with celestial symbols and ties it to a jade staff. A subtle nod. The staff, of course, being a metaphor for the emperor's other instrument of state. You sip tea politely. To your left, Lady Yun leans in and whispers behind her sleeve, "Do you think they actually believe this?" You smile without answering, because it doesn't matter if they believe it. What matters is they act like they do. That's the trick with Taoism in the palace. It's both religion and performance. An emperor with poor health might suddenly engage in more bedroom alchemy, not because he wants to, but because his court expects it. Maintaining appearances of vigor meant stability. A tired emperor was a vulnerable emperor. There's a tale, fringe of course, about a minor ruler in the south who reportedly hired an actor to pose as his bedroom self. The real emperor sat behind a screen, instructing him on what to do while nobles observed from a distance. It sounds absurd. Then again, this is the same empire where a dead empress was married to a tree to fulfill a celestial omen. You think back to your last evening with the emperor, how calm he was, how measured, and how deliberate, not just in movement, but in energy. There was a rhythm to it, not passion exactly, not intimacy, but something ritualistic. He touched your hand like it was a tuning fork. You're snapped back to the present as the priest burns a slip of paper containing the emperor's birth hour. Smoke curls upward in tight spirals, a sign, supposedly, that the channels are clear. The concubines are dismissed after a final blessing involving rice grains and crushed amber. You leave the Jade Pavilion feeling not quite spiritual, but certainly watched. Back in your chamber, Shuang, the quiet maid, waits with a small box. Inside, a ginseng root, a sachet of saffron, and a folded note that simply reads, "Tonight, yin rises. Be centered." You raise an eyebrow. That's not a love letter. That's instructions. You drink the ginseng tea slowly. It tastes like earth and old secrets. As the sun sets, you prepare yourself, not just with makeup and perfume, but with breathwork, posture, and timing. Because if the emperor truly follows Taoist alchemy, then you are part of the ritual, a living instrument in his cosmic symphony. And your role? To harmonize. You lie back on the embroidered cushions, heart steady. The moon is rising, full and pale like a polished pearl, and somewhere across the palace, a door creaks open. The emperor begins his alignment, and so do you. It's early morning and someone is screaming. Not loud, not bloody, but a sharp-clipped wail like a startled bird. You freeze mid-step in the garden as you recognize the voice. It's one of the junior attendants, and she's just found something, or rather, someone. Lady Zhen. She's collapsed in the hallway outside her chamber, her silk robe soaked, her mouth slack. A eunuch is already kneeling beside her, 2 fingers pressed to her neck, looking grim. You inch closer but know better than to linger. This scene is for officials now, for record keepers, for the imperial medics in the rumor mill, because Lady Zhen was favored. Last week, she was seen strolling with the emperor near the koi pond. He gifted her a scroll of calligraphy, a sign of favor, and now she's dead. Or nearly dead. You're not sure yet. You turn away before someone sees you watching. Your maid, Shuang, appears beside you like a shadow and murmurs, "Tamarind tea," 2 cups on her table, 1 broken. You don't need more detail. You understand. Poison, again. In a palace so heavily coated with ritual and performance where every gesture can mean 5 things, poisoning is the bluntest of tools. It's inelegant, it's terrifying, but it works. The whispers start immediately. Who was threatened by her rise? Did she boast too loudly about her calligraphy gift? Did she let slip something she shouldn't? Or was it the tea itself? A misstep in protocol? A servant bribed? You've seen it before. A concubine ascends too quickly, draws attention, then disappears. First from the night register, then from her chamber, and eventually from conversation altogether. There's no warning, no trial, just a slow fade until someone else wears her color. Historians still argue whether these incidents were acts of palace intrigue or whether they were simply stress-induced illness. The court records are vague. Fell ill, withdrew from service, returned to family. All convenient euphemisms for being pushed off the jade balcony of life. Today, you feel it more than ever, the fragility of it all. Favor here is sharp. It cuts going both ways. There's a story that makes its rounds in low whispers about a famous concubine who faked a miscarriage to avoid being named a consort. She knew that bearing the emperor's child would paint a target on her back, so she wept, smeared crushed pomegranate on her robe, and claimed she'd lost it. No one questioned her, but she never rose again, and she lived to old age. Survival often means sacrifice. You spend the rest of the morning reorganizing your silk storage, pretending not to think about Lady Zhen, but her absence presses on you like humidity, unspoken, inescapable. And then mid-afternoon, a messenger arrives with a scroll. You recognize the seal. The chief eunuch. Your stomach dips. Inside the scroll, a formal invitation to the emperor's tea ceremony tonight. Not a summoning, not a visit, just tea. But even a cup of tea in his presence is a sign, especially after a poisoning. You ready yourself with painstaking care. Your robes tonight are yellow with soft gray embroidery, an echo of autumn skies. Measured, elegant, not boastful. Your hair is adorned with a single silver hairpin in the shape of a crane. You arrive early, not too early, just enough to be seen as dutiful. The emperor is already seated, sipping from a celadon cup. His expression is unreadable. You bow low, gracefully, and take your place on the mat laid out for you. He offers no greeting, just gestures toward the tea. You drink. It tastes like chrysanthemum and ginseng, a strong blend. You pretend not to feel the tension in your spine as you set the cup down. He finally speaks. Jen was careless. Just that. 2 words. Not an accusation. Not sorrow. A statement. You nod, eyes lowered. She left her cup unattended, he continues, after bragging about something that wasn't hers yet. Ah, that's it. She spoke of elevation. Too soon. You choose your next words carefully. Even a crane must wait for the wind. He smiles faintly. And yet some flap before it blows. It's a test and a confession. The rest of the tea is quiet, tense, but not cold. You are not here to comfort him. You are here to listen, to witness, to not die. Back in your room, the silence feels louder than usual. Shuang draws your bath. You soak in water infused with mint and rose petals, your limbs floating like silk. You think about that broken teacup, the second cup left untouched. The thing is, no one will ever admit to it. There will be no accusations, no arrests. The palace will quietly rotate staff. The tea will be reviewed by officials. And next week, another concubine will be gifted a calligraphy scroll. There's a fringe belief among certain Taoist scholars that consuming fear can shrink your soul. That every time you feel the cold shiver of danger and survive, a small part of you vanishes, dissolves like sugar in tea. If that's true, then most of the inner court is already ghosts. You dry off, dress, and press your forehead to the cool wall beside your bed. You're alive. Today, but tomorrow, only the tea will know. You wake to the sound of poetry, not a metaphor, actual poetry. Somewhere, someone's voice drifts through the air, soft, lilting, measured. A female voice. She's reciting verses in the cadence that's so specific to palace salons. Gentle but clear, emotional but always within the bounds of decorum. You lie still on your sleeping mat, staring at the ceiling as her words swirl in. Something about plum blossoms, or loneliness in early spring, or maybe both. It's always both. In another life, you might have found this romantic. But here, it's strategy. Poetry in the palace is never just poetry. It's status, it's flirtation, it's shade. It's subtle declarations disguised in rhyme and metaphor, folded into brushstrokes and layered meanings. And today, it means something is happening. Your attendant opens the shutters slightly to let in morning light. Dust motes drift lazily. The garden outside is quiet, but there's a tension in the air like the moment before a curtain rises. Something is in motion. At mid-morning, a eunuch delivers the invitation. You've been summoned to the Imperial Poetry Salon in the Hall of Fragrant Ink. Sounds lovely. It's not. It's a minefield wrapped in silk scrolls. The hall is a long, elegant room with painted eaves and polished floors that reflect the light of dozens of floating lanterns. The guests? Select concubines, lady scholars, and a few favored court officials. The emperor will not attend in person, but his preferences will be relayed, discreetly of course, by his chief eunuch, who watches with a face like a closed fan. You're handed a brush, a fresh scroll, and asked to compose. Just like that. No warning, no theme, no time to edit. You take a slow breath and begin. You go for safety, a verse about bamboo in the wind, enduring storms without snapping. It's a metaphor so common it's basically diplomatic code. Humble, loyal, calm under pressure. You finish with an elegant final line and pass it forward. Across the room, though, Lady Wen is taking a risk. She recites aloud, clear and unflinching. A shadow lingers after the candle is blown. Empty rooms echo louder than joy. The air shifts. A few ladies glance at each other. One even stifles a cough. That's not just poetry. That's commentary. Lady Wen was close to Lady Zhen, the concubine who collapsed last week under highly suspicious circumstances. She hasn't been seen since. Everyone suspects poison, though no one says it. But now Lady Wen has said everything without saying it. Dangerous. The eunuch tilts his head slightly. Noted. You keep your face serene. There's a story whispered in palace kitchens, preserved like pickled ginger by bored servants. Once, during the Tang dynasty, a concubine's poem about falling autumn leaves was interpreted by a jealous empress as a wish for the emperor's death. The poet vanished before nightfall. Her poem was found scratched into the back of a sandalwood comb a week later. True or not, the message was clear: be careful what you write. Historians still argue whether these poetry salons served any purpose beyond spectacle and social ranking. Some believe they helped the emperor identify wit, loyalty, or subversion. Others say they were just elegant distractions from real court business. You suspect they're both right. After the salon, you're walking through the garden when Lady Chow, gossipy, beautifully dressed, always one fan flutter away from a scandal, sidles up beside you. She whispers, "Did you hear? The emperor's writing again." You glance at her sideways. "Poetry?" She grins. "Letters, maybe. Poems? Possibly. Secrets? Definitely." You hum noncommittally, but your pulse quickens. Later that evening, your maid sets a tray by your bed, a pot of warm tea, candied walnuts, and something unexpected, a small folded scroll tied with silver thread. No seal, but the brushwork is unmistakable. You unfurl it carefully. 5 words written with deliberate space between each. Bamboo bends, but does not break. Your poem, your exact wording from earlier today, returned to you. He read it. You stare at the paper, heart quiet but full. In this world, silence is safer than affection. But a reference, a quote, that's intimacy. That's a hand brushing yours in a crowded room. That's a whisper in a hall full of spies. You burn the note immediately as expected. Ashes curl like petals into the brazier, but the message remains. The emperor sees you. He remembers. Later that night, while the lantern flickers and the wind rustles the eaves, you open a forbidden book you've hidden inside a false bottom drawer. A compilation of anonymous romantic verses called The Songs of Jade and Smoke. It's technically banned, but widely read among women in the court. No one admits it aloud, but everyone has a favorite stanza. Yours is this: "We do not speak of love, not aloud, but your shadow follows mine across the tiles. Even silence can wear perfume." Tonight, the line feels heavier than usual. You imagine him reading your scroll, pausing, rereading, choosing his 5 words in response, deliberately echoing your metaphor to signal he understood it, and to let you know that he did. There's a fringe belief among palace scholars that the most powerful communication is what's unsaid. That in places like this, where surveillance is constant and the walls are embroidered with ears, it's the silences that carry the deepest truths. You're beginning to believe it. Because tonight, there were no kisses, no summons, no perfumed nights, just 5 quiet words, and somehow you feel more seen than ever. You're roused before dawn by soft footsteps and the scent of sandalwood smoke. A messenger arrives, not with a scroll or summons, but with a bundle wrapped in red silk. You untie it carefully. Inside, a miniature figurine carved from jade, 2 cranes intertwined mid-flight, wings touching, beaks poised toward each other like lovers caught mid-whisper. This is odd, not improper, not scandalous, but definitely not routine. Your maid Shuang tilts her head and murmurs, "A blessing for harmony or reunion." You raise an eyebrow. With whom? She just shrugs, living or otherwise. And that's when it hits you. Of course. It's Ghost Festival season, the 7th month, when the dead are said to roam freely, when families burn paper offerings to ancestors, and inside the palace, when ancient customs crawl out of scrolls and into the halls. You've heard of these things before. Spirit weddings, posthumous vows, arranged unions between 2 deceased individuals, or between a living person and someone long gone. It's not superstition. It's court ritual. Politics that extend beyond the grave. This year, you've been selected to attend a ghost bride ceremony. You're not the bride, thankfully, but your presence as a witness is both an honor and a subtle reminder. The past is never really past. As you prepare for the ceremony, your robes are selected with great care. Not white, the color of death. Not red, reserved for joy. You wear pale blue, a shade associated with still water, quiet emotion, and safe passage between worlds. The ceremony takes place in the Moon Pavilion, a rarely used wing with dust-covered arches and silent corridors. Everything is draped in gauze, white silk like mist clinging to stone pillars. A table is laid with incense, lanterns, and an empty bridal robe, arranged as if a person still wore it. You glance around. No one's crying. This isn't grief. It's administration. The groom died 2 years ago. A noble son promised to a distant lord's daughter. The match was arranged when they were children, but before it could be fulfilled, he drowned in a boating accident during a court outing. Now the girl, still alive, is being married to his memory. She'll remain unmarried for life, live in a quiet estate, and care for her late husband's ancestral shrine. In return, her family keeps its titles, its land, its proximity to power, and the empire avoids the embarrassment of a broken political betrothal. You sit still as the priest chants. The girl bows 3 times to the empty robe. A scroll containing the marriage agreement is burned, its smoke curling into the rafters like a departing soul. Somewhere behind you, a low sob escapes. Someone, perhaps the bride's cousin, can't quite maintain the facade. There's something almost beautiful about it, in a tragic, surreal way. But the part that really gets you is this. They make her share a bed tonight. Not with anyone living. Of course not. But a separate chamber has been prepared with 2 pillows, 2 cups of wine, and a paper effigy of the groom laid beside her. She's expected to sleep beside it, as if the marriage must be consummated spiritually, if not physically. Historians still argue about the origin of this practice. Some say it dates back to the Shang dynasty. Others think it emerged during the Warring States period when alliances needed locking in, even if one party didn't survive the war. But what's clear is this. In ancient China, death didn't void contracts, it just complicated them. And sex, even symbolic sex, still had political weight. You remember another story, whispered by a former concubine temple devotee. Once, a young noblewoman dreamed of her dead betrothed every night for a month. She stopped eating. Her family, panicked, arranged a ghost wedding. Afterward, the dream ceased. She lived peacefully until old age, wearing white every day and refusing to ever see another man's face. You're not sure if it's true, but in the palace, truth isn't always what matters. It's how belief shapes behavior. When the ceremony ends, you're dismissed without ceremony. You return to your chamber under a sky thick with clouds that glow faintly in the moonlight. The air is cool, wet, like something is watching. You can't sleep, so you light a small lamp and flip through the old erotic poem scroll again. Yes, the songs of jade and smoke. You find a stanza about ghosts. Even shadows know desire. Even silence craves skin. It's meant to be romantic in a haunted sort of way, but tonight it just chills you. There's a fringe theory among palace mediums, yes, that's a thing, that the inner court is home to dozens of spirits. Not angry, not vengeful, just like lingering. Concubines who died young, emperors who died lonely, eunuchs who were never quite sure where they belonged. One attendant insists that every time someone new arrives, a shadow passes over the incense tray. A welcome or a warning. You don't believe it, not really, but you also don't not believe it. You blow out the lamp and curl up under your silk coverlet, eyes open to the dark. Outside, somewhere in the silent wings of the palace, a young woman lies beside a paper groom, and you think to yourself, sex here never needed a heartbeat, just paperwork. Dawn creeps across the curved eaves like ink bleeding into rice paper. You stir under the covers, chilled by a draft that shouldn't exist. Your windows were closed. You're not sure if it's real or if your imagination is still haunted by last night's ghost wedding. Either way, you light incense, just in case. Today you've been summoned again, not for tea, not for poetry, but for something stranger, a ritual performance, not one you'll watch, one you'll join. You're told very little, as usual, only that the emperor has requested a ceremonial enactment of ancestral customs, and that certain women of the inner court are to take part. Translation, ritualized sex. But not real, not literal, not exactly. The euphemism is bedchamber ritual. It involves robes, symbolism, and a dance-like procession performed in front of a specially constructed altar, meant to bless the harvest, the emperor's health, and, more discreetly, his fertility. You exhale slowly. It's not your first. This kind of rite is older than the palace walls themselves. Based on pre-Confucian practices, perhaps even older than the Zhou dynasty, these ceremonies once formed part of the fertility festivals meant to invoke heaven and earth. Male and female forces brought together to generate harmony, symbolically, with props, with metaphor, and occasionally with actual witnesses. You arrive at the Hall of Earthly Harmony, a space rarely used except for coronations and strange seasonal rituals like this. The floors gleam with polished jade tiles. Bronze mirrors hang from the ceiling to reflect celestial symbols. You and 4 other women dress in layered robes of white, gold, and crimson. Each layer signifies an element: fire, water, wind, metal, and earth. It takes over an hour to complete the dressing. Then you're handed a silk fan, painted on it, a lotus. Open. Of course it is. The emperor enters from a private passageway, flanked by two elderly officials and a Taoist priest. He's dressed plainly today, well, as plainly as a man can look in robes embroidered with dragons hurling thunderbolts. His expression is neutral, but his eyes scan the group like a calligrapher assessing brushstrokes. The ceremony begins. Chanting, bell chimes. You and the other women begin to circle the central dais, stepping in perfect unison. You fan yourselves in slow, stylized gestures. Open, close, open, pause. This is not a dance. It's a symbolic offering. You are representing the cosmic feminine. He is the cosmic masculine. Together, you're acting out an ancestral memory, the union of heaven and earth. You're not touching, not even looking directly at him. But it's strangely intimate. The priest recites from the classic of rites, referencing ancient unions between kings and consorts. He speaks of flesh as metaphor, of seed as promise, of the harmony of pulse and breath. You're not entirely sure he knows what half of it means. Still, his voice is soothing. Then comes the symbolic presentation of the bed. A platform is unveiled, covered not with cushions but with symbols: bamboo for vitality, pomegranate for fertility, mandarin ducks for loyalty. You kneel beside it, not on it. The emperor stands opposite. Between you, a bowl of uncooked rice. You reach out and stir the rice with your fan. That's it. That's the climax of the rite. You don't laugh. No one laughs. Because everyone knows what this means. Everyone knows that every movement here echoes through the bureaucracy. This ritual will be recorded, filed, maybe even commemorated with a poem. Not because anything happened, but because everything symbolized something that might happen, or should. Historians still debate whether such rituals were performative echoes of older fertility cults or political theater repackaged in religious garb. One camp argues that they served real metaphysical purposes, aligning dynastic power with the celestial order. Another sees them as choreographed propaganda designed to reinforce the emperor's virility and his court's loyalty. You personally think it's both. After the ritual, you're given a drink, sweet wine infused with osmanthus and deer antler shavings. It tastes like syrupy nostalgia. Your role is over, but your name will be logged. You performed, you symbolized, you were seen. Back in your quarters, Shuang prepares your bath with lotus petals. You ask if she's ever attended a ritual. She shakes her head. Only from the corridor. I like the drums. There's something about the ceremony that lingers in you. Not arousal, not quite pride. Something older. Like you reached back through time and touched the wrist of a woman from 1,000 years ago and found her pulse was your own. That night, you can't sleep. So you do what you always do when your mind spirals. You turn to the scroll of jade and smoke. You find this line. The performance is not the act, yet the act lies hidden in the performance. You close the scroll slowly. Even in rituals stripped of touch, there is intimacy. Even in symbol, there is power. And in a palace that thrives on control, sometimes the safest way to speak is with silence and a bowl of rice. You wake up to an unfamiliar scent. It creeps in before your eyes even open, sharp, floral, deliberate. Not your usual sandalwood, not plum blossom, not the temple incense that lingers on robes after morning prayers. This is different, bolder. It smells like jasmine layered with something heavier, clove? Or is it camphor? You sit up slowly. Your maid, Shuang, is already alert, lips pressed into a tight line. It's from Lady G's quarters, she says quietly. New perfume. You blink. That's strange. Lady G doesn't change scents. That's her thing. She always smells like neroli and rice starch, understated and elegant. But today, she's announcing something. And in the inner court, smell is a message. You make your way toward the west corridor under the pretense of delivering embroidery threads to a mutual maid. Along the way, the whispers begin. Two concubines, heads bent over a tea tray, exchange glances when you pass. Another fiddles with her fan a little too long. The air is thick, not just with perfume, but tension. Then you hear it. A man, removed, not executed, not publicly, just gone. No trial. Just reassigned to a far post in the north where the winters crack bones and mail doesn't reach. The story comes together slowly, like threads in a tapestry of scandal. Lady G had a lover, possibly a musician, possibly a merchant's son smuggled in with a shipment, or maybe someone from the Ministry of Rights. someone she could encounter without raising alarm, someone she shouldn't have touched. You return to your quarters and find Shuang folding your robes with practiced calm. She was seen passing a note, she says, voice low, a scroll fragment tucked into a brush case. You feel your stomach tighten. Love, in here, is not a risk. It's a sentence. Because you are property, your affections are leased. Your body is sovereign territory, and only the emperor holds the key. To offer it to another, even in words, even in longing, is treason. The records won't say Lady G had a lover. They'll say she withdrew from courtly duties. The man transferred for service. But everyone will know, and no one will say a word. Historians still argue whether these affairs were ever real or just constructed by rivals to eliminate competition. There are dozens of recorded disappearances, always vague, always convenient. A few left behind poems written hastily in margins. One painted her sadness on a fan that now sits in a museum case with the caption, believed to be composed before exile. It's the believe that stings. Later that afternoon, as you brush your hair, Shuang returns with a vial. She wore this today, she says, holding it up. Mandarin veil. You pause. That's not just perfume. It's a message. Mandarin veil is an old recipe. Jasmine, clove, camphor, used by brides in border provinces and courtesans. A scent that lingers long after you leave. It's bold, defiant, dangerous. You look at yourself in the bronze mirror and ask the question no one says out loud. What would make a woman in this place risk everything? That night, you find yourself pulling out your hidden scroll of jade and smoke. The poems aren't particularly explicit, but they vibrate with feeling. One stanza stands out. We touched only in ink, but your name stained my fingers long after the page was burned. You trace the words with your fingertip. It makes you wonder what Lady G wrote. Was it a confession? A goodbye? A shared verse passed across hands like a pressed flower? You remember a story told in a low whisper by an exiled tutor. Once a concubine fell for a court painter. They never spoke aloud. They only exchanged sketches. A folded crane tucked under her inkstone, a tiger hidden in his scroll case. Their love lasted one spring. Then she was gone. He stopped painting animals after that. There's a fringe belief in certain northern temples that a woman who dies for love will return as a white peony, rare, fragrant, and always out of season. You're not sure whether that's romantic or cruel. The next morning, Lady G appears in the temple. Pale, composed. Her robes are pale celadon, embroidered with silver leaves. She walks slowly, lights 3 sticks of incense, bows to the altar, and leaves without speaking. It's the final act. She's not dismissed, not exiled, but she's moved to the outer court, the quiet place for women who are no longer favored, no longer useful, no longer dangerous. That's what this was. Not just a broken rule, a challenge. She loved, and she left a scent that will linger long after she's forgotten. The emperor says nothing. There's no announcement, but Lady Qiao receives new jewelry. Lady Wen is summoned to the pavilion of radiant calm. The wheel turns, and Lady G becomes a ghost that no one dares mention. That evening, while tea cools beside you, you pick up your brush. You write carefully, just one line. In jasmine she dared, in silence she vanished, in memory she lingers. You burn it, of course. But as the smoke curls upward, you swear it smells faintly of jasmine. You're sitting beneath a cherry tree, pretending to embroider. The needle moves, the silk thread coils and glistens in the morning light. But your hands are working on instinct. Your eyes, well, they keep drifting toward the eastern ceremonial gate where something not so subtle is unfolding. Banners in pink and peach silk are being hoisted. Red lanterns bob gently on long poles. Musicians arrive in pairs, each carrying flutes or zithers, all dressed in matching robes like decorative pastries. This isn't a festival for worship. It's a festival for pairing. Today is the Chikshi Festival, the 7th day of the 7th month. Most people know it as the Magpie Bridge Night, the only day in the lunar year when the coward and the weaving girl, 2 separated lovers immortalized in the stars, can cross paths again. It's supposed to be about love. But here in the palace, it's about alliances. You are not participating. Not directly. You've already been spoken for, after all. But you've been summoned to observe, which means you are to sit, smile gently, sip tea, and on occasion offer soft-voiced commentary on the women parading before the officials. Think of it as imperial matchmaking. Only weaponized. The garden has been transformed. Long scrolls hang from pine trees, each bearing blessings for future matches. Wishes written on bamboo strips dangle from cords tied in elaborate knots. A few flutter by your elbow. One says, "May he be patient." Another, "May I bear 3 sons." And a third, scrawled in messy, excited calligraphy, "May I stay far away from this place." You smile, at least someone's honest. A procession begins. Young women, mostly daughters of nobles, some cousins of mid-level officials, walk slowly across the pebbled courtyard, each in her finest robes. Their hair is perfect, their makeup soft and careful, their smiles choreographed. You know what they're doing. They are auditioning for futures. Some hope to become wives, others consorts. A rare few, if fate or beauty or politics allow, might find their way into your world, the inner court. You sip jasmine tea and glance across at Lady Chiao, who is watching a girl in pale lilac robes with a frown. "She's trembling," Lady Chiao murmurs. "Look at her fan." You do. She's right. The girl's fan quivers with every step. "She's afraid," you whisper. "She should be," Lady Chiao says, her voice soft but cutting. Fear is the first currency here. You return your gaze to the parade. One girl stumbles slightly as she bows. Another recites a line of poetry that is too obscure for anyone to pretend to appreciate. A third, bolder, brighter, smiles directly at the astrologer as he takes her birth time. He doesn't smile back. But then comes Lady Shan! She is a different breed. She doesn't shuffle or hide. She walks with the grace of someone who has never been told to wait her turn. Her gown is sunflower gold, a color almost too bright for court, and her hairpin is shaped like a tiger's eye. She bows only once, deeply and deliberately, and says nothing. You lean toward Lady Chow again. That one will cause problems. Lady Chow's smile spreads like honey. I sincerely hope so. After the formal walk, the real event begins. The games. The girls are paired with young men, some from noble families, others from useful ones. They toss embroidered pouches, guess riddles hidden in lacquered boxes, fold paper birds while blindfolded. It looks charming. It's also surveillance. Every gesture is being assessed. You recognize one of the officials watching from the pavilion. He works in the Bureau of Rituals, which means every match here has already been pre-filtered, astrologically aligned, and approved by someone at a desk with a quill. Still, this is their chance to confirm compatibility. A girl with dimples nearly drops her pouch into her partner's lap. They laugh. Another girl bows so deeply her forehead touches her own fan. Too eager, too desperate. Everyone sees. You watch quietly, remembering your own selection day. It wasn't during Chikshi. It was at a winter banquet. You wore blue silk and were told to look thoughtful. You smiled once, just once, and that was enough. Later, you pass by the pavilion where the names are being recorded. You pretend to examine a scroll of poems, but your ears are open. You hear 6 matches confirmed, 3 postponed, and 1 declined. Quietly, kindly, brutally. No one will explain why. There's a fringe belief in one of the outer provinces that if you reject your Chikshi match 3 times, your heart will be locked in the sky, far from your body. You will feel your love, but never touch it. You will watch it move across the heavens, unreachable. The punishment for hesitation. You return to your quarters as dusk falls. The tea has cooled. The garden lights flicker with fireflies and distant laughter. Somewhere Lady Shan is probably sipping wine, smiling at herself in the mirror, knowing full well she made an impression. And perhaps that was the point. Perhaps she doesn't care who she marries, as long as someone remembers her name. You lie back on your mat and stare at the beams overhead. You wonder, not for the first time, what would have happened if your name had never been chosen? If your smile had faltered that day, if your robe had torn, if you'd caught a fever and missed the banquet altogether. Would you be married to a scholar now, living in the South, reading letters by oil lamp while your children sleep nearby? Or would you be just as lost, just with fewer silk robes? You pull your blanket over your shoulders and close your eyes. In the sky tonight, they say the magpies have formed their bridge. But you are already on the wrong side of it. The morning begins with music, not the gentle flute of the gardeners, not the temple bells or the guqin in the scholar's wing. This is different, crisp, deliberate, and full of wit. You know the melody immediately. It's the sound of the 4 seasons, a piece famously associated not with the inner court, but with courtesan. Yes, courtesans. And no, they're not the same as concubines. Courtesans live outside the palace. They are not registered as imperial property. They don't owe their loyalty to one emperor or one dynasty. They exist in salons, tea houses, and private pavilions, entertaining scholars, officials, poets, and sometimes spies. They're not bound by protocol, though they live by performance. They don't marry, they don't bear heirs, but they shape history in whispers and verses. And today, you're going to meet them. You're not sure what prompted it. A whim of the emperor? A cultural event proposed by one of the dowagers? Or maybe just boredom, refined, dangerous boredom. But an invitation arrives. You are to attend a literary and musical evening at the Pavilion of Flowing Clouds, a side hall rarely used except when something is meant to happen, without being recorded too formally. You dress with careful intent. Not seductively, that would be gauche. No, tonight is about intelligence disguised as charm. So you wear soft blue silk embroidered with pine needles and flying cranes. Cranes are modest, wise, long-lived. Your hair is pinned back with a brush-shaped ornament. Scholar's elegance. When you arrive, the room is already rich with scent, osmanthus, sandalwood, a touch of wine. Lanterns cast soft halos. The courtesans enter like flowing ink, elegant, confident, unhurried. Their laughter is light, their glance is expertly timed. They don't just know how to speak, they know when not to. One carries a lute, another holds a fan painted with a line of poetry. A third, tall and poised, walks as if the floor itself were part of her gown. You're seated near the emperor, present tonight, though dressed simply. His robes are dark blue, his gaze unreadable. He greets the courtesans with a nod, not a smile. This is not about pleasure. It's about comparison. You realize it quickly. The emperor isn't here for entertainment. He's watching, measuring, watching how you, the concubines, the women inside the cage, react to those who have stepped outside it and still survived. The courtesans perform, not dances, not songs. They perform conversation. One recites a riddle about a fox in a snowstorm that ends with a pun so clever even the stoic astrologer chuckles. Another tells a story about a scholar who disguised himself as a woman to infiltrate a palace and fell in love with the emperor's calligraphy instead. You smile. You get the metaphor. Then Lady Wenhua takes the center. She's older than the others, perhaps 30. Her robes are a shade of purple that isn't quite court approved, but you don't think anyone here dares correct her. She recites a poem, not from memory. She composes it on the spot. He writes the names of his favorites in water on silk and wonders why they disappear. No one claps, but everyone hears it, especially you. You exchange glances with Lady Chiao, who lifts her teacup with a barely there smile. There's a story whispered in the inner court about a courtesan named Liu Yao, who once wrote a treatise on moral conduct disguised as a love letter. It was so clever, the emperor had it copied and distributed to the Ministry of Rights. She never set foot in the palace, but she influenced court policy for 5 years. Historians still debate whether Liu Yao ever existed. Some claim she was an invention of male poets to romanticize their own failures. Others say her real name was never recorded, deliberately. She didn't need credit. She had power. Back at the pavilion, the courtesans take their leave one by one like petals drifting on a breeze. No fanfare, no curtsies, just a faint trail of perfume in the memory of their words. The emperor remains silent. You're dismissed shortly after, but you leave feeling something. It's not envy exactly. It's not quite admiration either. It's awareness. Courtesans are not free, not truly, but they're not trapped either. They own nothing, but everything they touch turns into reputation, influence, stories. They are authors of themselves. You are a chapter in someone else's book. Back in your quarters, Shuang helps you change. You ask her quietly, have you ever seen one up close? A courtesan? She nods. Once, in Suzhou, she played the bamboo flute while writing calligraphy with her toes. You blink. Her toes? Shuang shrugs. The men were impressed, but the women listened to her voice. That night, unable to sleep, you open your worn scroll of jade and smoke again. You search for something about courtesans. There's a short verse, buried between more erotic lines. She writes no heir, no oath, no seal, only the echo men who thought they understood her. You close the scroll slowly. The echo remains. You skip breakfast the next morning, not because you're ill, not because you're fasting for some spiritual rite, but because you're playing a card few in the inner court ever dare to use, withholding yourself, politely, symbolically, strategically. You're staging what everyone calls a bedroom strike. No drums, no banners, just silence and a refusal to engage. A move as old as dynasties themselves. You wake, stay in your robes, brush your hair, but leave it slightly tangled. When Shuang brings warm rice porridge, you wave it away. You lie back on your mat. You are not tired. You are not sick. You are simply, clearly, unavailable. The maids understand immediately. Eunuchs notice within an hour. And by midday, the phrase Lady X is resting begins circulating among the laundry women like an unexpected monsoon. You're not alone, of course. Lady Yun has claimed she is observing a silence of filial mourning, even though her mother died years ago. Lady Chow says she's taken a vow of purification after spilling tea on a Confucian volume. Lady Wen is allegedly too moved by a dream about her ancestors to participate in earthly matters. It's not coordinated, not out loud, but it's happening. A subtle alliance, a quiet refusal. Because last week, during one of the poetry salons, the emperor made a comment. Not cruel, not vulgar, just offhanded. She was adequate, he'd said after reading a poem Lady Yun wrote for him. Adequate. A word with no edges but all insult. You remember the look on her face. Not rage, not heartbreak. Something worse. The sting of being noticed just enough to be dismissed. So now, the women wait. Historians rarely record these moments. They speak of rebellions, of northern incursions, of taxation crises and tribute deliveries. But they often forget the soft, complex politics of a woman quietly saying no in the emperor's house. Because in a place where your body is currency, refusing to spend it is an act of rebellion. You think back to the stories, some whispered, others written in letters burned before sunrise. There's the tale of Consort Mei during the reign of Emperor Yuan. She withdrew from court life for 9 days after being overlooked during a ceremony. When the emperor finally visited her, she asked him about the difference between loyalty and obligation. He left without answering. 3 months later, her brother was promoted. Coincidence? Of course not. That's the brilliance of these small resistances. They're wrapped in virtue, filial piety, artistic melancholy, devotion to ritual, but they are calculated and often effective. By day 3, the court begins to adjust. Eunuchs bring perfumed oils to the chambers of less favored women. Incense smoke gets heavier. The music near the emperor's pavilion grows more insistent. You receive a gift, a single scroll, no seal, no signature, just one line of verse. If the moon refuses the lake, must the reflection still appear? It's not brilliant poetry, but it's familiar. A reference to something you wrote months ago. You burn the scroll. Not out of cruelty, but because that's part of the ritual too. Everything unspoken must be kept that way. Later that evening, Shuang brings you tea. He sent for plum wine instead, she says. Is it laced, you ask lightly. With apology, perhaps, she replies. You smile. And yet, you don't move. That's the hard part of this game. Holding the silence, waiting long enough that they start questioning the echo, but not so long they build a new melody without you. There's a fringe belief recorded in a temple ledger from the Sui dynasty that when a favored woman closes her door for 7 days, her absence will summon an omen. A bird will cry at the wrong hour. A scroll will vanish. The emperor will dream of water rising. You don't believe in omens, but you do believe in timing. On the 5th day, you write your own line. He asked for devotion. I offered silence. He did not know the cost. You fold it carefully, place it beneath a sandalwood tray, and leave it there. Unsent, unseen. It still counts. That night, a meal arrives with no explanation. Your favorite, glazed lotus root, ginger broth, sticky rice steamed in banana leaf, a silent olive branch, and with it a single lotus petal pressed flat between 2 rice crackers. Not perfumed, not painted, just present. You eat slowly, quietly, aware. The next day, the emperor asks the chief eunuch if Lady Yun is still mourning. She is reflecting, Your Majesty, the eunuch replies, and the others? They remain distant. A pause, then, send winter jasmine, they'll understand. You do. It's not a surrender, it's an acknowledgement. You rise, bathe, brush your hair with care. You do not rush, you do not preen, you simply prepare. Because here, even returning must be choreographed. By the end of the week, the court settles again. The music softens, the silence is shortened, the emperor resumes his schedule. But something has shifted. He asks questions now, small ones. about your favorite incense, your thoughts on a poem, your opinion on a certain ritual, tiny cracks in the wall. You walk through the garden that evening and pass Lady Yun. She doesn't speak. She doesn't have to. She glances once, slow and sideways, the kind of glance that says, "We did that." And you did. Without raising your voice, without lifting a blade, without even touching a door, you made him wait. There's something strange in the air today. It's not the weather, though the clouds hang low, like silk being pulled too tightly across the sky. And it's not the wind, though even that seems to hush as it curls through the eaves. It's not even the smell, though someone in the southern wing is burning sandalwood so strong it seeps into your tea. No. What's different is the hum of attention. The way everyone seems just slightly on edge, like they're trying not to look in the same direction at the same time. It begins in the bathhouse, not with a scream, not with a broken hairpin or a stolen robe, but with a name, Lady Shen. You're drying your hands on a bamboo towel when you hear it whispered, twice, then again, a ripple across the hot mist. Lady Shen, you pause. Lady Shen? Really? You know her, of course, everyone does. Quiet, precise, always dressed correctly, always reading the correct text. She's the woman who never drops her fan, never speaks first, never forgets to thank the servants by name. Pleasant, but not noticeable. Until now. Because in the last 8 days, Lady Shen has been summoned to the Emperor's quarters 4 times. That's not routine. That's not coincidence. That's a shift in gravity. You remember how this works. You've seen it before. First come the frequent summons, then come the new robes, then the redder lipstick, the extra silk layers, the discreet but unmistakable scent of clove oil on her wrists. After that comes the seating change at ceremonial banquets, a step closer to the throne. And finally, the stories. Lady Shen is in the story phase. You hear them as you pass. She showed him a poem she wrote in the style of Li Qingzhao. She cried during a discussion about filial piety. She told him something about the dowager, something personal, all unverified, all dangerous. That's the strange thing about power in the inner court. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates like dew. One glance, one whispered confession, one poem folded into a sleeve, and now she's everywhere. Lady Chow rolls her eyes over breakfast. It's always the quiet ones, she mutters. You shrug. Quiet doesn't mean harmless. Quiet often means loaded, Lady Wen adds, like an arrow. By midday, the palace is buzzing, not openly, but in that restrained, tea-sipping way courtiers have perfected. You hear of a gift, a jade comb with a phoenix carved into the spine, delivered to Lady Shen's chamber at dawn. You hear of a new maid assigned to her, one who previously served in the Emperor's personal wing. And then comes the final, confirming omen. Lady Shen is to sit at the Emperor's banquet table for the upcoming autumn moon gathering. Not beside it, not below. It's official. She's in ascent. You'd be lying if you said you didn't feel it in your stomach, that weightless flutter of threat mixed with admiration. Not because you wanted what she has, at least not exactly, but because she did it. She moved the unmovable. She got him to notice. And worse, she did it without sparkle. No one saw it coming. You remember a tale once told in a back hallway from the reign of Emperor Jejing. A woman from the laundry wing, barely educated, barely dressed, was summoned once for a poetry contest and never left the Emperor's chambers again. The woman who had held his attention for 3 years disappeared the next day. Rumor said she'd been overheard criticizing the Emperor's cough. Historians still debate whether Lady Shen's rise was planned, earned, or simply timed with a political need. Maybe the Emperor grew tired of laughter. Maybe he craved silence. Maybe the dowager whispered something. Or maybe Lady Shen simply knew when to speak. That evening, you're summoned to the pavilion of soaring fragrance. The name is lovely. The purpose? Less so. It's the Emperor's private screening hall, used when he's assessing a woman, either to reward her, test her, or quietly push her aside. You've been here before. You choose your outfit with intent. A robe of storm blue silk with silver waves embroidered along the hem. Subtle, thoughtful. No perfume tonight, just rice powder and silence. He arrives late. Of course, he looks tired. You bow, pour tea, and wait. After a long sip, he finally says, Lady Shen has a clever mind. You nod. Yes, Your Majesty. She noticed something in my calligraphy that even the Minister of Rites missed. You incline your head slightly. She's observant. She told me a secret, he adds, almost to himself. You do not ask what. Instead, you lift the teapot and offer a refill. He watches you. What would you do with a secret like that? You answer evenly. I would hold it as long as I was permitted. He smiles faintly, then stands. You are dismissed. Back in your quarters, you find a folded slip of paper placed on your bed. No signature, just a single line. If a candle burns lower in another room, does yours seem brighter or just colder? It's not his handwriting, it's Lady Shen's. You crumple it, then smooth it again. You don't burn it, not yet, because you know what this is. It's not a threat. It's not even a flex. It's a signal. She's letting you know she knows. About you. About all of you. About how power changes the air before it changes your status. Later that night, you look out your window at the lanterns bobbing in the wind. You wonder, will Lady Shen survive her own rise? Because in this place, climbing is easy compared to staying. And once your name echoes in the Emperor's ear, someone else always fades. The banquet hall is a sea of golden light. Lanterns swing like blossoms caught in mid-fall, each trimmed with red tassels and etched with characters for joy, abundance, and ironically, permanence. You're ushered into your place 2 tiers below the imperial dais, just close enough to smell the jasmine incense coiling around the Emperor's throne. Just far enough that if your face tightens, no one of importance will see. But your gaze isn't fixed on the Emperor tonight. It's on her, Lady Shen. Tonight is not a test, not a soft invitation, not a subtle shift. Tonight is her debut. She sits to the Emperor's left, not lounging. No, she is too smart for that. Her spine is straight, her eyes lowered just enough to seem modest, but still aware of their power. Her robes are the color of pale river clay, almost shimmering in the lantern light, embroidered with cranes in flight and chrysanthemum petals. Her hairpin, you notice, is the same one gifted to Empress Wen during the Mid-Autumn Gathering 40 years ago. It's symbolic, bold, and deliberate. She has arrived. No one says anything aloud. Of course not. But the way conversation quiets when she lifts her teacup, the way Lady Wen's fan pauses mid-wave, the way even the eunuchs glance sidelong as they pour wine, it's all there. Confirmation. This is not a rumor anymore. This is power, visible and wearable. And as you watch, you feel your ribs tighten, not from jealousy, but from something older. Something called recognition. Because you've seen this arc before. You've lived it in small ways. The shift from whisper to glance, to presence, to influence. You know what comes next. The tilt of the balance. The slow reshaping of who matters and who becomes decorative. Dinner begins. Small porcelain dishes arrive like offerings to gods. Sliced lotus roots, candied walnuts, sea cucumber, and ginger broth. Everything precise. Everything layered in meaning. You poke at your rice and pretend to smile. The zither players begin their first set. A tune from the Han court, nostalgic and clean. A subtle cue. The past remembered, perhaps even mourned. And then come the riddles. A troupe of actors dressed in flowing robes of bronze and cream step forward to perform a traditional poetic challenge. Each riddle is symbolic, each one a trap disguised as a joke. The theme tonight? Autumn, change. The quiet fading of color before the fall. You see the metaphor, even if no one dares name it. The Emperor enjoys this game. You remember that well. He leans forward now as one of the actors offers a riddle comparing falling leaves to forgotten women. A chuckle ripples around the room. But then Lady Shen leans in, soft, just a whisper, and says something. He laughs. Loudly, it cuts through the hall like a knife. The last time you heard him laugh like that, it was during a spring wine tasting. You had offered a verse comparing his robe's color to plum blossoms. He had smiled, tilted his head. That smile had lasted weeks. This one, it belongs to her. You sip your wine slowly, as if you might taste something different this time, but it's just wine. Then the gifts begin. It's tradition. At each seasonal banquet, the Emperor acknowledges a few women, not always the most favored, sometimes just those who served well or endured quietly. It's part of the choreography. Tonight, Lady Qiao receives a sash, peach silk embroidered with waves. It suits her. Lady Wen, a brush set with jade handles. She nods politely, says nothing. And then, Lady Shen, she is given a phoenix hairpin. But not just any hairpin, you know this one. Everyone does. Gold filigree, ruby inlays, a tiny hinge that allows the wings to tremble as she moves. It is not a token, it is a signal. This pin is only granted to those acknowledged not merely as consorts, but as potential empresses. Even the air stills for a moment. A heartbeat of silence before the world exhales. Lady Shen bows. Graceful, not smug, not surprised. She knows. So does everyone else. You finish your wine and place the cup down too softly for anyone to hear. You smooth your sleeve. You glance once toward the Emperor, just once, and he does not look back. That night, as you walk through the lantern-lit corridors back to your chambers, the words echo in your chest. It's her turn now. You reach your room. Shuang is waiting, quiet, hands folded. She does not ask how the banquet went. She simply unpins your robe, lays out your nightwear, and pours chrysanthemum tea with steady fingers. You sip once, then twice, and then you say very softly, "Do you remember when it was mine?" Shuang hesitates. "Yes, my lady," she says. "I remember." You set the cup down, somewhere in your chest, not anger, not sadness, but release. Because you've played this game long enough to know the truth. The light only ever rests on someone. It never stays. And now it's hers. For now. You reach for a scroll you've left unfinished for weeks. You open it, dip your brush, and write a new line at the bottom. Even the favored blossom must fall when the tree remembers its roots. You let the ink dry. Not to send, not even to share, just to remember who you are, who you were, and that no phoenix ever rises without first being burned. 3 days after the banquet, the palace doesn't return to normal. Not really. It pretends to. You hear the music in the outer courtyards again, flutes trailing like ribbons through the breeze. You smell the usual incense from the Hall of Eastern Rites, sandalwood with a faint trace of orange peel. The cooks resume sending rice porridge laced with ginger to the concubines, and eunuchs go back to walking in perfect rhythm. But it's all choreography now, hollow, mechanical, because something has shifted. Lady Shen has risen, clearly, publicly, and that means someone will fall. Everyone knows it, no one says it, but the hierarchy must always breathe. For someone to be lifted, someone must sink. For Lady Shen to sit beside the Emperor, someone must be moved away, politely perhaps, quietly, but decisively. You wait. You are not summoned. You are not consulted. Your poetry, once requested every few days, now sits untouched. Even Shuang has noticed. She says nothing, but her fingers linger longer on your sleeves as she helps you dress, as if she's quietly anchoring you in place. And you do the only thing you know how to do in moments like this. You disappear in plain sight. You walk slower, speak softer, show up exactly when expected, no more, no less. And when you hear your name mentioned in a corridor, not shouted, not even spoken fully, just the first syllable, you turn around slowly, like a breeze shifting direction, and pretend not to notice. This is the dance. You've danced it before. You remember a story, told late one night by an older concubine long since gone, about a woman named Shu who rose too quickly and burned just as fast. She was gifted a phoenix robe within a month of arrival. 6 weeks later, she was reassigned to a temple to recover her health. She never returned. Historians still argue what happened. Was it a plot, a mistake, an allergy to court politics? But in this world, causes are less important than optics. You spend your mornings in the Hall of Ink in quiet thought, a sanctuary within a sanctuary. It's where concubines go when they wish to look useful without being visible. Copying scrolls, writing letters to no one, translating texts that will never leave the archives. It's peaceful, yes, but it's also strategy, because being seen not wanting to be seen is sometimes the safest move. You sit by the open window and let the sunlight fall across your hands. You copy poems from the Book of Songs, lines about geese in flight, about lovers whispering behind reed curtains, about the ache of distance, all metaphors, all reminders. Then she walks in, Lady Shen, no guards, no fanfare, just herself, in lavender robes, eyes unreadable. She sits beside you, opens a blank scroll, doesn't write. You pretend not to notice. Your brush continues, but she waits. Eventually, softly, she says, "Do you know what it's like to get everything you thought you wanted?" You don't reply. "Not yet," she continues. "It's colder than I expected." You glance sideways. "That's because it's high." She smiles, tired, not sad, just worn. "I thought he wanted poetry, he wanted silence. I gave him both." Now you turn. "And he wanted something else." You pause. "Then that's his mistake," you say. There's a long silence. Then she asks, "When did you know it was slipping?" You know what she means. By the time you ask that question, you answer, it already has. She looks down at her hands, perfectly manicured, inkless. You realize she hasn't written anything today, or maybe ever. Then she whispers, I thought I could hold it, just long enough to become untouchable. There's no such thing here, you say. We're all touchable, just not all at once. Another long pause, then quietly, will he turn on me? You don't lie? Yes. She closes her eyes. It's the most human she's looked in weeks, and you almost reach out, almost, but then she stands, smooths her robe, says nothing. As she walks away, you watch the shape of her fade into the corridor's haze. She doesn't look back. That night, Shuang brings you a letter. No seal, anonymous. Inside, a single line of text. The pen has pricked. The blood has started to show. You don't need a signature. You know who it's from. You burn it before reading it a second time. And for the first time in many days, you sleep easily. Because you remember something that too many women forget. A rise is never permanent. Only how you fall is yours to choose. The morning is too quiet. No gossip flutters in the corridors. No music trails from the emperor's quarters. Even the birds in the garden seem to have paused mid-song, holding their breath with the rest of the inner court. Something's wrong, and everyone knows it. You take your tea early today. Jasmine and goji, meant to brighten the complexion and calm the nerves, but the cup trembles slightly in your hand as Shuang places it before you. Not from fear, from anticipation. Lady Shen has not been seen in 2 full days. No morning greeting, no calligraphy circle, no appearance at the midday offering to the ancestors. No sound, no sight, no trace. You remember how she looked just a week ago, how the phoenix hairpin caught the light, how her voice never rose above a whisper, how the emperor leaned in to catch every word. And now, just days later, she's a ghost. They say she's unwell. They always say that. But you know better. You've seen this play before. The favorite becomes the fallen faster than most can unlace their robes. It begins with a pause, then a silence, then a quiet removal of things. Her brush case, her hair oil, her reading cushion. By dusk, her zither is gone from the pavilion of moonlight. By dawn, her name stops appearing on the servant rosters. By the next moon, the other women stop mentioning her at all. Because in the inner court, erasure doesn't come with drama. It comes with politeness. That's how you know it's real. You walk the north garden path slowly, pretending to admire the apricot blossoms, but your ears are tuned for whispers. Shuang trails behind you, humming lightly, shielding your solitude from view. You don't ask questions, not aloud, but your mind is already filling in the blanks. What did Lady Shen do? Say, refuse? Confide? Was it the poem she sent you? The one you burned? Or was it something simpler? Maybe she lingered too long, expected too much, or, worst of all, believed herself untouchable. The emperor doesn't hate women like that. He simply forgets them. Lady Chow passes you near the stone bridge. She's holding a fan shaped like a ginkgo leaf, flipping it slowly as if stirring the air. She moved too cleanly, she murmurs without looking at you. You nod. She shone too brightly. Same thing, she says, and keeps walking. Later that day, a dish of chestnut cakes is delivered to your quarters. No note, no message, just the cakes, still warm. You stare at them for a long time. It's not affection, not forgiveness. It's a signal. You are remembered. And that, in this world, is everything. When you're summoned that night, you go without comment. No elaborate robes, no penned poem, just a robe of pale bronze and a single jade comb. You're not trying to impress him. You're reminding him who you've always been. He doesn't speak for a while. The room smells of cedar. The wine is already poured. There's only one cushion placed across from him, yours. After several minutes, he asks, "Did she speak to you?" You don't answer right away. Then calmly, "She asked if she'd be next." He nods. "Was she afraid?" You tilt your head. "I think she was surprised." Silence. Then, "Do you miss her?" A pause. "No," you say honestly, "but I remember her." He smiles faintly. "That's enough." You drink your wine. You leave without asking for anything, because you don't need to win. You only need to survive. Back in your chamber, Shuang waits with a basin of lavender water. She doesn't ask how it went. She never does. As she combs your hair, she whispers, "The wind's changed." You nod. Tomorrow, another girl will be invited to present a painting. Another will be gifted earrings. A third might be moved closer to the emperor's wing. And Lady Shen, she will fade. Not from memory, but from presence. And presence is what keeps a woman alive here. You write one last line in your scroll before bed. The brightest lamp burns fastest, but its warmth stays in the walls. You seal the scroll, not to send, just to hold. Because tomorrow, the game continues. And you are still here. The palace grows still. Outside your chamber window, the wind rustles the silk tassels of the lanterns, gentle and aimless, like a sigh that forgot its reason. Somewhere far away, a bell chimes, one long note that stretches into the night and fades like breath on glass. You lie back on your mat, listening to the silence. Not the hollow kind, but the soft silence of a space long lived in. A silence shaped by footsteps on polished floors, whispered conversations, and dreams that never dared speak their names aloud. The candle flickers. Shuang has already closed the doors, drawn the curtains, and retreated quietly. You are alone, but not lonely. You've seen women come and go. You've memorized the choreography of rise and fall. You've loved, hated, waited, and survived. Now the court sleeps. And for tonight, that is enough. Let your body soften like fabric folded over and over again. Let your hands release whatever they're still holding. Let your breath slow, longer on the exhale, softer on the inhale. The world can wait, the scrolls can wait. Even the emperor can wait. Right now, there is only you. You and the quiet strength that's carried you this far. You and the sound of your heartbeat matching the rhythm of the wind. You and the memory of 1,000 silken steps leading to this moment of stillness. Tomorrow may bring summons, or silence, or stories. But for now, let go. Close your eyes. Let the petals fall where they may. You are still here. You are still you. And the night is long and gentle. Sleep now. You've earned it.